God is all you need, but as God is love, or one of the qualities, then yeah, it's kind of right.
Now we have a very. The evening is really the gem. This is the fulcrum of the evening. We've invited. Very pleased to see that they accepted Sham Sundar Prabhu and Gurudas, who will give us account their first-hand experiences and exchanging with George here at the Manor and also in Berry Place, Betterton Street. Gentlemen. One seat for you. Is there another seat over there? Right to the seats. Please a big hand for Gurudas.
Whenever we talk about our glorious friend George Harrison, I think it's most important to remember one thing. These men, as Sakshi Gopal so well described, were great demigods that appeared on this planet at a special time in history. And to assign glory and influence to these men is good, but only in the context that the greatest glory and the greatest message, that they actually changed them and that they accepted, was from Krishna himself, through his glorious devotee Srila Prabhupada. The message of Krishna was passed down intact to him, and then through us, tiny instruments, to George and his friends. So the real power is there with Krishna. We are only praising George tonight for accepting that power and using it as a pure devotee would. So, that's it.
If you don't give love, you can't get love. This is one of our principles. Transcendental via media. Para, love for Krishna, love for Radha, love for Guru, love for each other, das anudas. Prabhupada gave us the principle to serve each other. That could save the world. I want your success and you want my success. And George, like a sponge, took the philosophy. You saw how he encapsulated, we are not this body, or you don't identify with the body. You can change your country, you can change your religion, you can change your external, but the soul is eternal. And so each of us had a different relationship with George. And we gave him the philosophy sweetly. And Sambhasundar was his very good friend, and even went to live with him. I can say
The roots kind of go back further, though. They're a few years before we arrived here to meet George. You were there too, Gurudas. Both of us were living in Haight-Ashbury district in San Francisco in 1960, the summer of 1967. And George Harrison, of course everyone had been listening to the Beatles, but George came personally to Haight-Ashbury. And we missed him. But the thought was embedded deep in my heart that one day we must meet this man. And teach him about Krishna. Shortly thereafter, in late '67, I was in jail. I was in jail for a month, and I didn't have much to do but chant Hare Krishna and think about how Srila Prabhupada would like us to change the world through the Hare Krishna movement. And the idea was formed in my head that we must go and meet the Beatles. So this is where kind of the seed got planted.
Yes, when Prabhupada asked us to go to London, the 3 couples and Saraswati the baby, that was because Bob Dylan and the Beatles were ahead of the time in influencing everybody. We thought we should meet the Beatles, and who would do that unless they really believed in what they were doing? Now, George is known, he said, as the serious one, but he had a wonderful sense of humor. So Samuelson mentioned when he came to the Haight-Ashbury, because he thought, well, this is the height of hippiedom, and it's free love and free everything. And then Haight Street was full of homeless people and people begging. And George actually imitated his walk to me with the heart-shaped glasses, laughing all the time, because he said, as I went down the street, people were saying, hey George, let me give you this guitar. And hey George, let me give you this peyote. And hey George, let me give you this LSD. And hey George, can you take my wife? You know? And it went on. It got worse. Take my pad, George. And then because he was so intelligent, he said, why do people always want to give gifts to rich people? Why not to the poor?
I always kind of like to stick to a linear thing, and that Gurdas really, the poetry. So here's a letter. This is kind of the first evidence that we have, a letter that on May 6, 1968, that Prabhupada, the Swami, it wasn't Prabhupada, Bhaktivedanta Swami wrote to Mukunda. Shamasundar wanted to go to London. What is your opinion about this? I am very much eager to open a center in London. If Shamasundar and Malati go there, then 1 or 2 other brahmacharis may go there to organize a center in London. And as soon as it is in make-up, then I may also go there for some time to deal with the Beatles, who are so much anxious to understand about spiritual knowledge. This is kind of the first hint. Prabhupada reaching out. As Sakshi mentioned earlier, that they had already been hearing about Prabhupada, the Swami. Bhaktivedanta Swami, his message was slowly permeating towards them.
And even John was a polarity of the total iconoclast, cynic, organized religion, and give peace a chance. So we lived with him, and I had a relationship with him too. And one day he said, Gurudas, I want peace. I want to give peace a chance. And if you notice, give peace a chance is in the mantra fashion, and Hey Jude is a mantra. So he says, I want to give peace a chance. He says, I'm going to let my hair grow to show that I want to give peace a chance. Chaitra Guru, intelligence comes in. I said, John, peace takes sacrifice, so if you really mean it, you should cut your hair off, like me. And 2 weeks later, I was walking down Fleet Street, and John and Yoko had, not completely, but short hair.
There's so many things we could talk about with George tonight. It could go on for like 2 or 3 or 5 hours. So I'm just trying to speed it up a little bit. We came to London, 1968 in September, 1st of September, late August. And with part of our intention of being here, of course, was to meet the Beatles, although our main purpose was to please Prabhupada, whatever we did. But we thought meeting the Beatles would be an important way to empower Prabhupada's message in the British Isles. And by Christmas, we had met the Beatles and befriended them. That's only 3 months. It was not easy, but it was magic.
Can I do the preamble to?
Yeah, you can just show how that happened.
We were sending something to Apple Records every day. We found an apple that walked, and we put Hare Krishna mantra on it. And we were in International Times. We did covers for them and articles, and we sent it. And Peter Asher, their artist and repertoire, his sister was Jane Asher, famous. He threw everything into the rubbish bin.
Well, the Beatles had put an advertisement all over London that if you have a song or you have something, an idea, bring it to us at Apple. I mean, this is the most famous men in the world, and they were changing consciousness more than anyone else on the planet, including all the presidents and popes. They were asking for ideas from the public.
But later they told me that we were inundated with self-proclaimed messiahs, etc.
But it allowed us to put our foot in the door.
Self-proclaimed messiahs.
We got our foot in the door.
Well, yeah.
Because of that.
That's true.
Prabhupada always used an example on a crowded train in India. If you come into the cabin and you just ask one man if you can put your foot up on that bench, just rest your foot, then gradually, pretty soon you're sitting down, and then ultimately you're laying down. That's Prabhupada's method.
That's what he did to our hearts and souls.
But what Gurudas is describing is sort of the way we did it. That we just little by little, we were. Show business is still alive and well in this country, but it started with this kind of activity. We shaved our heads. We wore dhotis, bright yellow dhotis, everything we could to stand out and show these people we were special. We changed our lives to do that. We became a band. We practiced together every day, knowing somehow or rather that we would become a friend of the Beatles. By the time we met them, we had our act together.
So how did you meet the Beatles?
How do you meet the Beatles?
How did you meet them?
Well, by great good fortune. Our friends from San Francisco came to visit the Beatles. George had invited them that day.
Oh,
He was at Haight-Ashbury. If you're ever in England, come and see us. Well, they took him up on it. About 15 Ken Kesey, the two managers of the Grateful Dead, who are my friends. Peter Coyote. Peter Coyote was there. And two heads of the Hells Angels, the San Francisco chapter of Hells Angels. Tumbleweed and Gentle Pete, something like that.
And their motorcycles, they paid her 500.
Yeah, and the Rock, you remember that? We had a little telephone there at Betterton Street. Rock Scully, the manager of the Grateful Dead, called me from London Airport and said, we just came into town. We don't have a place to stay. Can you put us up? But how many of there are you? He said, there are 12 of us. And 2 motorcycles. But so all we had was my little truck. And I took it out to Heathrow, and everybody got in back. 12 guys. They didn't bring the motorcycles. 12 guys got it with all their luggage. We took them to Betterton Street.
And even Hells Angels get jet lag. You see, what happened is they just got off the plane. They had big, what they called engineer boots. One of them had a swastika etched into his cheek. They actually had weapons, the girls. The pocketbook opened and weapons fell out like the Pandava's weapon. We fed them a 'Jamuna Malati Janaki feast. then we showed him a film that we just got from Boston, the first film of Swamiji walking down the street. Oh, look, Swamiji's looking towards the camera. This is the best film we've ever seen. To the Hells Angels, there's an old man walking up and down. So they fell asleep on the floor. Ken Kesey and I were old friends, and he asked me, why do you need a guru? I did do you want a doctor that hasn't read no books or anything, no tradition? So he really warmed up. The Hells Angels got up, and they wanted to start a branch. We sent them to the arts laboratory, but it was so funny that Mukunda told them the logistics of how to start a branch in England. So Mukunda's responsible for the Hells Angels.
Well, okay, to speed it up a little. A few days later, they moved out. Rock Scully called me on the phone and said that he was going to attend a Christmas party at Apple Records. And so I asked him if I could come. Do you think I can hang out with you guys that day? Rock said, sure, man, come on down. So the whole story's in my book, Volume 1. But to make a long story short, a long afternoon at a big crowded hall on the upper floors of Apple. It was a Christmas party. There was trees in the corner, lots of food and drinks. And all the famous people in Britain were there. Maybe 100 people. And so I found a little chair at the end of the room. I was sitting quietly. And hour after hour, they kept saying, the Beatles are going to come, Beatles are going to come, Beatles are going to come. And one by one, each of the Beatles finally looked in the door, saw this crowd, and ran. And 1, 2, 3, and finally George peeked out. And he started to head out the door also, but his eye caught me across the room there. It was the daffodil yellow dhoti that did it. He saw it. And he just started walking through all these people to me over in the corner. They all passed aside like this, and George came right to me and sat down. He said, where have you been? I've been waiting to meet you. And that's how it began with George. It was like, normally with people like of that special, higher ups and all, I'm very shy normally, very shy. I regret doing anything like that. But with George, it was like meeting Gourdas or one of you somewhere. Hey, how you doing? It's been a long time. Been a few bodies now since we sat down together like this, hasn't it? It was that close. He says, come on out to my place as soon as you can. He drew me a little map on a cocktail. And I explained to him the basics of Krishna consciousness. The first thing he wanted to know about Krishna, I said, well, he's the supreme personality of Godhead. He's a person. It's two. You are a soul, and he's a soul, and he's the supreme soul. And he got it. He just went, yeah, that's right. That was it.
He was looking for Krishna.
That just, yeah.
So then he came over to a place, it was on Betterton Street. The underground newspaper went down to Endell Street, so they let us live in a warehouse. No hot water, no water, cold water, but no hot water, no heat. George used to do a Monty Python thing. I was so poor, I lived on the floor. You had a floor? I was so poor, I lived in the box. You had a box? Sam Mashinda made a box on the bottom floor from Malati, a refrigerator box. He put a little window in it, and she lived there with Saraswati, so you had a box. So George came over, and like Sam Mashinda said, he's just like Prabhupada. It makes everybody feel comfortable, see the commonality. And he loved prasadam, and he loved our altar. He seemed to love everything about it. And then we walked 7 steps together to wash our hands, and Chanaka Pandit said, if you walk 7 steps side by side with somebody, You're mates for life. And then he said, this is so lovely. And then he invited us to his house.
Yeah. And when he met all of us together as a family, living so harmoniously in one place, not bothered by the sufferings that he could obviously see we were undergoing, always happy. He saw this, he watched us and met us and interacted with us over a period of months, and it only deepened his appreciation of Srila Prabhupada. He could hardly wait to meet the Swami. If these were his students, if these were his disciples. We went to his house, we had great, unbelievable kirtans. He came to our place. He had two lives, though. He said, I have my rock and roll friends, and I have my Krishna friends. And I want to keep them separate a bit. He also was a lone wolf in his own way, so he wanted me to be the filter for him. Everyone on the Krishna side, I'll call you first. He wanted that to be in place so he would be protected, because anybody who of his rank and standing in the world who took up a religion, a new religion, would be seriously abused by the public. So he wanted to keep it a little quiet, keep it low key.
And as it was, some of his mates, some of his friends started to make fun, even John.
Yeah.
No, John even made fun. What is that book? Bhagavad Gita, know the Kama Sutra?
Finally, in January of '68, early January, George called me one day and he says, listen, we're out here at Twickenham Film Studios making a film. I guess it was, what was that? Let It Be film, yeah. He said, my mates are here, I want you to explain Krishna to them. So I finally found the place, and it was mobbed in front of this Twickenham Film Studios. Huge studios, in Burbank. And out in the streets in front were thousands of young girls holding up signs, the Fab Four, screaming. And I thought, I made my way through all these hordes of girls to the front gate. And it was a big closed gate with two bobbies standing in front. I thought, how am I going to get in here? George didn't tell me anything. And just then a white Rolls Royce pulled up to the gate. So I ducked down and I duck walked alongside the car in through the gate, past the bobbies. They didn't see me, and I looked up and Yoko was looking down at me out of the back window smiling. Then I stood up. The car went on, and I stood up and I thought, oh God, they're going to see me now and they're going to throw me up. But as I looked up, all these people were walking by dressed like Roman warriors, and the guy from Dracula, what was his name? The Dracula guy, white cushion. Huh? No, it was an Englishman. Christopher Lee walked by, and he had on a black tuxedo with a white shirt with blood marks on it. So I don't look any unusual in this place, so I just walked around. I walked around till I heard music coming out of a studio.